hey, I can manage my mind and my emotions more, that's priceless.
Welcome to our podcast, How to Live an Extraordinary Life from Duke's Education. My name is Ricky Tavares, and alongside my superstar colleague, Libby Nicholas, we have the unique privilege of meeting world-leading figures to understand how they have successfully navigated both life's ups and downs to go on and achieve extraordinary things.
I don't believe that positive thinking is the solution to everything. What I do believe is that building a positive relationship with your mind is where the power lies.
Today, we're meeting Maya Raichoora, a successful entrepreneur and mental fitness advocate with a unique story. She's faced challenges with physical and mental health that have led her on her own extraordinary journey.
I loved sport. I went to PE, obviously, but did I ever learn how to build my confidence back or how to be more resilient or how to go for my goals and achieve them? I'd never learned that.
Today, Maya coaches elite athletes and CEOs, as well as being Nike's first ever mental fitness trainer.
She's author of the book Visualize, and later she'll be walking us through a very special visualization exercise.
This week, we're tackling the topic of anxiety.
Last year alone, over 200,000 referrals were made for children under the age of 17 with issues relating to anxiety. So it's a topic of huge concern for us as educators and for us as parents.
We can think of no one else we'd rather have on the show today to discuss this huge topic, which is anxiety. Welcome, Maya Raichoora. Maya, I think it goes without saying, one of the leading names globally in the world of visualization, successful entrepreneur, working with world-leading athletes, CEOs, and normal everyday people, helping with their mental fitness. And I've got to say, Nike's first ever mental fitness coach as well. We are absolutely delighted to have you on today. I want to kick off just understanding and learning a little bit more about your own background. So would you mind just giving us a flavour as to how you've arrived at where you are today? And obviously it's not all been plain sailing, as you go into detail in your books. It would be wonderful to just get under the hood of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, of course. It's funny. Like when I say, okay, I'm UK's leading mental fitness expert, people are like, wow, like that's so fun. But yeah, it really didn't start like that at all. So kind of going back to my own experience in education, I felt very lucky. I grew up in a family and an environment where, education was really important. I loved school and I was pretty high achieving. But I also played a lot of sport. So I played badminton for England, and it was nice because I guess not only did I believe it, but my teachers also, my parents would say, you've got a lot of potential in life. So that was nice. It felt like there were many options. Then at the age of about 15, I started developing a bit of pain, some symptoms in my stomach, and went to the doctors because something was wrong. It wasn't just your usual bug. And after some tests, they diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. But many people live with it quite normally. So I just took it on my chin and carried on school as normal. It was like GCSE time, so the pressure was also quite high. Unfortunately, the disease was more aggressive than I thought. And it meant that the next 4 years of my life just completely changed. And I find it really difficult to talk about it sometimes because it's hard for others to understand. But, my daily life was, I was still going to school, but I was going to the loo maybe 30 times a day. I'm on about 60 tablets. No one knows. I'm wearing like adult nappies. I'm having to run out of classes. And the physical pain, so crippling. The only way I can describe it is like quite animalistic and paralyzing. So this was all happening. But at the same time, mentally, I was noticing that my confidence was going, my hope was going, my drive for my future. It was all just going because more and more I was like, I can't do this. I can never do that. I can never go to uni. Can't play badminton anymore. So, I was just getting smaller and smaller. And at the same time, all my friends are getting bigger and bigger. They're all thinking about their dreams, their goals. And it was such a scary position to be in. I learned about visualization, which is a particular type of mental training in hospital, not on purpose. It was actually by accident. But it really helped me, I guess, change my mind for the first time. It was this moment where when I was mentally rehearsing walking again, my mind was like, Maya, what if you could walk again? What if you could go to uni? And I remember just seeing images of me, at Bristol Uni in the kit, like in badminton, because I had got into uni. I'd got my grades, but I couldn't go because I was too unwell. And so for me, it was like, but how am I ever going to get there? And so when I left hospital, it really became a thing to make it happen. And I think the mind plays a much bigger role than we ever realise. And so for me, it was constant learning, practicing, kind of obsessively to be like, how can I use my mind to help me? But I never learned that at school, ever. I loved sport. I went to PE, obviously, but did I ever learn how to build my confidence back, or how to be more resilient, or how to go for my goals and achieve them? I'd never learned that. That's not a fault of my school. It's a fault of the system. And so I had to take it in my own hands. For me, it was like, I want to teach others the power of the mind. And so now, today, I work with athletes, global companies, C-suites, high performers, to not make the mistake I did, but also to rewire the brain, to think, feel, perform like the top 1%, because it's urgent in our society, for sure.
That's an incredible story, Maya. Incredible. When I was reading your book, it's so moving to read of your experience and how isolating that must have been for you at that age, and to read about how you've overcome that. And you were saying how it's like a kind of happy accident that you learned about visualization. I mean, I love that story. What a life-changing moment for you, and for so many others who are benefiting from it. So let's get to the specifics then. What exactly is visualization, and how does it differ from mindfulness and other approaches? And how do we get mentally fit?
The big old question.
The big question, right?
So visualization is also known as mental imagery. And it's basically where you are creating images, environments, and feelings in your mind before they happen. It's very prominent in the sports world. So a lot of elite athletes will use it. And essentially, it's a tool that can help you not only build your character and gain confidence and, build your resilience, but it's also great for things like public speaking, or being able to perform better in sport, or maybe you've got a difficult conversation coming up. How can you prepare for that? And at the same time, what about your goals? There's that very, true saying that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I do believe that, because you want to see the example, and sometimes we don't have it. But we have the power to also create it. And really, this is about harnessing the power of your imagination. And, when we were young, I think we're very good at using our imagination. The other day, I was just walking, and these two kids were coming past, and there was a tree in front of us. And they were like, wow, look at this magical cave. And I was like, what? Where? But it wasn't there. Their minds are amazing, right? As we get older, the imagination, it gets skewed, because now, as adults, we tend to imagine the worst case things, or us failing, or, oh no, what if this goes wrong, or what if I don't get the job? And so we're using our imagination to worry and to fear things, not to create, not to go for our goals. And so visualization is about redirecting that. And if we look at something like mindfulness and meditation, these are brilliant tools to bring calmness and clarity to our brains. It's like a passive mental practice. Visualization, on the other hand, is where we're using our thoughts to rewire the brain. So when it comes to getting mentally fit, I think first, you've got to want to do it. You've got to see that you don't need to be broken or unhappy or sad to do it. It's something that if you just want to be better, feel better, think better, this is great. And to value it as strongly as you value your physical fitness. Because as a society, we don't. There is not one answer to mental fitness. I don't think visualization is the only answer. I think there are many different things we can do. But the point is, you've got to do it. You've got to try. And so the other day I was at school, and I asked everyone who here feels anxiety or pressure, or maybe they get frustrated, overwhelmed. Everyone put their hand up.
Yeah.
Everyone. Then I said, okay, who knows what to do about it? Yeah. 2 people out of about 200. 2 people. When I asked the same for physical fitness, who knows how to train their body, get fit? Everyone.
Yeah.
And it was like, you can just see the problem. We're not empowered with the tools to get mentally fit.
It's really interesting.
Fascinating. Can I pick up on one thing?
Yeah, of course.
There's so many ramifications for us as educators from your work. But you mentioned the power of the imagination, which is, the ability to visualize, the ability to imagine new futures. That your journey yourself started with what if, that magic if I could walk. And you mentioned how when children have imagination and use their imagination, obviously through play most of the time. But there is a time in a child's educational journey where imagination becomes lying, right? And how do we ensure that we can develop imagination in our children, in our young people, in a world where, although we're more connected than ever, they're on their phones, they're on their screens, on their tablets. I'm just interested in your views of imagination specifically and how we can foster that.
I always think about what Einstein said, where he says, like, logic takes you from A to B and imagination can take you everywhere. Because it can, right? It can. You can go into, like, realities that don't exist.
Absolutely.
And, like, you can always believe you're going to be an astronaut, things like that. I think the point is to remember that your imagination is working 24/7. So if you can learn ways to actually use it to your advantage, then that's great. And for example, like when I teach creative visualization, which is where you are imagining your emotion as like a character or like, like an Inside Out, the film.
Yeah.
I literally teach adults to do that. Now that might seem a bit strange for people. However, because your brain thinks in storytelling, shapes, colors, people, what we've grown up with, you can use that in a positive way. So I do appreciate that, yeah, sometimes it can just be lying and, are you just always daydreaming? And that's where the awareness piece of like, what am I using my imagination for? Because what I notice is that students are imagining them failing their exams or them not getting into uni or them not having any friends, right?
Yeah.
So this is where if we can start saying, well, what if you use your imagination to see yourself, in the job you want to, or studying at university?
I just want to pick up on a specific that you've touched on, which is that word fear.
Yeah.
So it feels like fear, when you talk to the younger generation, it seems to be the number one factor stopping them fulfill their potential. It's I'm worried about this, I'm not going to get the right grades, I'm not going to get into the football team, whatever it may be. In your book, I love this particular sort of quote you have around, should we be encouraging more positive thinking or less negative thinking? And given the discussion we've just had around imagination and seeing yourself in those, achieving your goals, what's your view on that? Because time and again, we're hearing young people ask us that particular question, do I need to just become more positive? Do I need to shut off these negative thoughts?
When I was, growing up, and actually a lot of students will see this online now, everywhere is saying positive thoughts only, like positive vibes only, all this stuff, right? Now, I don't believe that positive thinking is the solution to everything. What I do believe is that building a positive relationship with your mind is where the power lies. So a lot of people will come to me and they're like, oh, Maya, I just want to control my mind. And I'm like, no. It just won't work because it's like controlling a kid. So the analogy I use is if, your mind is a bit like a wild horse and you don't want to stop the horse or break it. You want to learn to ride it. And that means that you aren't suppressing it. You're not trying to force it to do something. You are learning the language of it. You are learning to nurture it. You're learning to work with it. And sometimes you are going to get negative thoughts. Sometimes you're going to get things saying, oh no, but you can't do this, or you'll feel a bit doubtful. The point isn't to listen to that. You don't have to believe every thought you think. The point is, how do you reply to it? If a child is nervous for an exam and the parent or the teacher is just like, you'll be fine. We're not understanding they're nervous, right? Their mind is telling them, oh no, if you don't get the A star, your parent's going to be angry. I mean, that was literally my thought, right? That's what I was going through. Or if you don't get it, you'll never get into any uni. Now, by us just being you'll be fine, it doesn't really help. They're still going to stay in that. So we have to say, okay, I know you're nervous. Very normal. In fact, that's good. It means you care. But all you can do here is do your best. You've trained, you've worked, you have revised. Now just do your best. And I think in school, we are always praised for succeeding, right? The person who gets 90% is the one that's shouted out in class and you get to go to assembly and all these things. But then the other part of it is as you get older, I think we always focus on our weaknesses. So if you get like 10 A stars and a D, the teacher's going to be like, right, we really need to work on the D. But you're also getting A stars in some things that, well, why don't we strengthen those more? Like, I wish someone noticed that, wow, she's great at public speaking. Let's nurture that even more. And so I think in school, it's very easy to just keep working on those weaknesses, but we're not very good at always celebrating the strengths too.
So many thoughts going through my head in terms of our schools and education, because, you know, you're absolutely right. The rewards and awards are given for such a narrow frame of reference, you know, academic brilliance or sport prowess. And actually, you know, great education and great teaching is really about finding the brilliance in every child, you know, enabling, empowering the flourishing of that child in regardless of what it might be, non-academic,
100%.
non-sporting. And we're looking at our curriculum at the moment across all of our schools to really build that into the core of what we offer. Because, of course, life doesn't work like that. You know, when these children leave school, they're not going to be rewarded and awarded every day if they're being brilliant and beating their peers. You know, you have to get on with it yourself in terms of intrinsic motivation. So how does visualization and mind training, mind fitness help with intrinsic motivation?
I mean, there's, I think, two key areas. One is going to be how someone can develop their character massively, because I feel like school is quite contagious in the sense, if you're in a group of friends that you're all quite similar, you're going to become like that quite quickly.
Herd mentality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's contagious, like the emotions, the thoughts, all of that. And so we kind of lose ourselves in it. We lose our character. Then you might go to uni and it happens again, and you form the same sort of thing. So, you know, whenever I meet someone young, I always ask them, who do you want to be? Who do you enjoy being? Because I think that allows someone to actually understand themselves a bit more rather than just always trying to fit in. And then the other side of it is reminding people that they cannot be anything they want to be in life. I don't believe that. But you can be everything that you are. But you've got to figure that out. And that requires so much self-reflection, time on your own, asking those questions to teachers. Like, I remember we did I think it was Gallup Strength Finder test or something to tell us what our job will probably be. And so many of us were like, oh, okay, then I must go for this degree or I must go for this degree, right? And it's interesting how quickly we're influenced at that age. And that's why I think, like, learning to listen to your voice is really the best source of intrinsic motivation, because we're learning to trust ourselves and to understand, you know, well, actually, if I want this, I'm going to go for it.
Let's say teenagers listening to this around the world, okay, who are in the middle of coming up to their formal exams, let's say in the UK, GCSEs, A-levels, IB, etc. Anxiety, a big issue in the run-up to them. Looking back at my own childhood, Jesus Christ, I can remember it, and traumatic at points, but you get through it and you look back with hindsight and sort of think, I wish I knew that, what I know now then. I would have been able to perform much better. What are your tips to those that are listening coming up to their exams right now to navigate anxiety in the run up to it, so they can essentially just do the best that they can?
I mean, first and foremost, it is so normal, right? And it's not something that just goes away. The best of the best athletes experience it. I experience it. You guys do. We all did. When you are feeling anxious, my first, biggest piece of advice would be, if your best friend came to you and said, look, I'm feeling so nervous about this exam, I don't know what to do, what would you say to them? You'd probably be like, hey, look, don't worry. You've got this. Just do your best. But do we ever say that to ourselves? No, we would let ourselves spiral and spiral and spiral. So the first thing is literally talk to yourself like your best friend has just told you that. Number two, often when we're feeling anxious, we're focusing on everything we can't control. The result, the A star, the uni. We're going so far ahead, right? Take a pause and think, actually, the only thing I can control in here is how I go in, my attitude, and just trying my best. So reminding yourself of that. And then, of course, whilst I'm slightly biased here, but the reason I say it is because it works so well, is I would do something like a creative visualization where you would close your eyes and you'd ask yourself, okay, where do I feel the anxiety in my body?
Amazing. For all the teachers listening, let's get onto this in our schools. That was brilliant. You gave us a real kind of taste there about a creative visualization. Would you mind... It might be a bit fun. Would you mind guiding us through a short visualization? And then everyone can follow us wherever they are.
Should we do one for anxiety? Is that
Let's
good?
do it.
Or,
Let's do it.
Okay, so with this one, it's super useful. And actually the science shows that in 90-second bursts, it's the best. But I'll do it a little bit longer so that, we're guiding you through it. So just use your imagination, get really creative, and then we'll hear what you all kind of came up with. So let's close the eyes and let's take a deep breath in through the nose. Big exhale out through the mouth. Okay, and just keep breathing in a gentle rhythm. Now, I want you to think about a scenario that is making you feel, or has made you feel, a bit anxious. So it might be an exam coming up, it might be maybe a person, maybe it's a conversation you have to have, maybe something in the future, anything that's making you feel a little bit of discomfort, maybe fear, worry. And I want you to notice, where in your body do you feel this emotion? It might be in your chest, like a bit of a tightness. Maybe it's a heaviness in your head. Maybe it's in the gut. Now, instead of running away from it or trying to suppress it, I want you to start thinking about, what does it look like in the body? If we had to give it a color, a shape, maybe a character, an animal, what does this anxiety look like in the body? It might be like a red fire. Maybe it's like a yellow spiky ball. Maybe it's a little puppy or like knots. It can be anything you want it to be. Use your imagination to help. And just notice, does it feel quite tight? Is it getting hotter? Is it cold? Maybe it's getting heavier. Let the anxiety actually release that emotion. Good. And now slowly with your mind, we're going to start to dissolve it. But I want you to be creative. Do you need to pour water on it? Do you need to kick it? Do you need to squash it? Maybe it just gets smaller on its own. But using your mind, let this shape, this object, this animal, let it get smaller and smaller and smaller. And keep going till it's the size of a tiny, tiny, tiny pea. It's so small. And now take a deep breath. And as you exhale, let it fully dissolve. And just notice the space, the calmness, the openness in your body now. Good, and very gently, you can open the eyes.
Powerful.
That's brilliant.
Okay, what did one of you see? You can explain. I always find it's useful for people to know what
it
people's
looks like.
imaginations bring up. Yeah.
So I felt the anxiety, the fear in my chest, in my heart specifically. Yeah. And I actually, when I was thinking about it, my heart started racing immediately. And because of the feeling, that physical sensation of my heart racing, suddenly the anxiety became a little blue bird fluttering.
Oh, that's amazing.
Kind of quite manically kind of flying around me.
Yeah.
And then when you guided us through the releasing, I opened a window and the bird kind of was erratically trying to get to the window. So I just lifted it up, put it on the windowsill, and then did the visualization of it flying away until it was tiny.
And how does that feel now?
Yeah, I'm so much calmer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mine's not as eloquent as that. Mine was a raging bull sitting right in my gut.
Yeah.
And I just had to keep kicking it.
Yeah.
And eventually, off it went.
Yeah.
And the peace was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just the tranquility
Yeah.
that you arrive at following that. That is so powerful.
And you know what's interesting?
And quick.
Yeah, and think about it. When, let's say you do express to, let's say, your partner or someone that you're feeling anxious, they're going to be like, oh, why don't you just calm down? Just calm down. Here's a cup of tea. Yeah, but it doesn't help. You just kind of want to punch them, right?
Yeah.
But just taking those, that was what, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. You can see that, you had to actually give it a bit of support to be like, you're okay now, you can fly away. Yours had to be a little bit more, aggressive with it, and that's normal. Like, I was also the same. When I use it, sometimes I have to like shoot the fish in my body, right? And that's okay. And that's kind of the joy of it. Like, both your imaginations, so different.
Yeah.
But yet, you're able to help yourself release an emotion.
Really?
So now
Absolutely.
next time you feel a bit anxious, you'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, look, the bird is back. And that's what I love about it, is we don't get scared that we're going to feel anxious. We're like, I have more ownership over this. And I think that type of, hey, I can manage my mind and my emotions more, that's priceless. Because what does the research show? That the most successful CEOs, leaders, the skill of emotional intelligence,
Number one.
You need it, but we're never taught it.
You know, there are different ways in which we teach our children, right? So there's obviously the kind of explicit subject discipline. So we would put time in the curriculum for maths, history, geography, etc. Then there's what we teach them through modelling, our own experiences, how we ourselves manage ourselves. And then they're learning, as you said earlier, from each other all of the time, probably in a more powerful way, actually, than direct teacher
Also the most
instruction.
dangerous way, right?
Absolutely,
Like,
yeah,
oh God.
absolutely. So we do teach self-regulation, but only really to our very young children. So in early years, reception year 1, we do teach them very explicitly to recognise the feelings in their body, linked to their emotion, and then strategies to self-regulate, which enables them to have carpet time and sit properly and, you know, be respectful of each other, etc. But then we don't really teach anything else in terms of self-regulation or cognition explicitly. And I think that your point is a really good one. I think what we can do is we can teach our children, both in our classrooms and in our homes, the strategies, as you have, which they will need at some point in their life, whether that be self-talk, visualization, you know, mindfulness, hopefully all of the above.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, through adversity, through failure, that one recognises one's own strength. And as a parent and as a teacher, we try to keep our children from failure. We try to protect them from failure. We want to keep them safe. But actually, you know, this is what's so interesting about doing this podcast and meeting you. It's through your adversity, the difficulty, I mean, the horror of what you went through that enabled you to recognise what you could achieve. And I think that's true of so many people who are extraordinary.
What tips would you give our teachers to basically take forward now in a classroom tomorrow, say for a year 10 class, to directly build mental fitness in that class?
2 things I'm going to say. Also, just on your point about failure, I still struggle with it. Like, when I get rejected and all these sort of things, it's not a nice feeling. And it reminds me of, you know, Sarah Blakely, where she's like, whenever she came home, her dad would always ask her, so what did you fail at today? Whereas most parents will be like, well, what went well at school today, you know? She said for her, it meant that she was never afraid of failing. So interesting, the power of a question, never, ever underestimate it. Same with my nurse, same with all of that. Them asking, well, what if you weren't in hospital, where would you be? So one thing for teachers, there's that saying, never judge a man by his answers, judge him by his questions. And I do believe that. We don't ask enough good questions. So even if the beginning of your registration, you ask that one question of like, what is life teaching you today? Okay, discuss that in your tables. Just interesting questions. Second, I think, now I'm going to mimic this from the research I've done in the workplace culture, is that most people learn because they're mirroring their leaders. So if our teachers, let's say, take 5 deep breaths before they start class, or let's say they maybe say an affirmation like, I'm excited what today brings, like students are going to start to remember that and start to mimic it. Same with like maybe saying something you're grateful for, right? There are little things. I think we sometimes overcomplicate things like mental fitness. We think a whole culture needs to change.
Yeah.
But really it's that one teacher, one moment, one conversation. I remember in my form times, we'd have these like 20 minutes before assembly where sometimes we would just do the randomest stuff. And it's like, well, why not spend 10 minutes? Everyone just journal.
Yeah.
You know, just journal with the one question of, hey, what am I excited about school today? Or what am I finding a bit difficult in school today? You don't need to share it with anyone, but you have 10 minutes. Try it. So think small. Think so small. And those little things like the questions, the journaling, the visualization, being a good example is, I think, a really good way to start. And that's how culture spreads, right? You ask those like, oh, what are you grateful for? Anything like that.
Hopefully we'll see that in more Duke's classrooms
Definitely.
over the coming months. Let's take a break from our questions, shall we? We asked some of our Duke's Education family what they wanted to ask you about mental fitness. So let's have a look.
Hi Maya. Last month, the former England football team manager, Gareth Southgate, made an impassioned plea for greater focus on men's mental health. Wearing your hat from Nike, may I ask for your views in terms of how we can better detect mental health signals amongst young and adolescent boys and the role sport can play in helping them? Thank you.
I think it is a really good question because, and obviously with the TV show Adolescence and everything coming out, I think it's a big conversation. One thing I will say, I am not a mental health professional, so my advice is not clinical or, medical. The thing I have noticed the most in men, and I mean this in football teams that I work with, but also young athletes or individuals, men really need to nurture and appreciate connection. And in sport is a really good example of where they can connect with each other and where they can talk to each other a little bit more because you're doing an activity, maybe you've made a bit more of like a friendship there. And look, everyone always says like boys don't talk to each other and that is true, but it's also not how they're wired. They're not wired like that. So we've got to create enough space and safety to do that. However, and this is where, when I was explaining to you when I went to that boys' school just a few weeks ago, I noticed that some of the language I was using, like safe space or talk about your feelings, was not resonating. And it was very interesting. Now, what did resonate was saying, oh, hey, if Mo Salah uses visualization, why don't you? Or if Michael Phelps does a little bit of meditation or, is open about the fact that he felt a lot of anxiety, isn't that cool? And so by giving them the role models or examples that they can look up to and relate to, I think that's very, very powerful. And it really comes down to the language, but also it's a cultural thing that I think sometimes we want to be cool and we want to fit in. Now, I think the one danger is the social media side, and no one can really control that. So all I would say from a parent point of view, teacher point of view, and also an individual, think of your mental diet. That doesn't mean your food. That means, what are you consuming? Because information and content is the number one thing you will consume. Kids will consume TikTok and Instagram more than they will their lessons. So just ask yourself, if your brain was like, the best supercomputer ever, right? And you had to pay for it every month, what would you want to feed it? You'd want it to get the best, the sharpest, the most resilient, right? So we've got to view this as not taking it for granted, but being like, how can we make it better and sharper and think better?
Now, on every episode, Maya, we ask our special guest a final question. And that is, who's one extraordinary person that has really shaped who you are today?
One would be, teachers have played a huge role in my life. My maths teacher was a big one, and it was because I always used to tell myself I was bad at maths. And she used to just remind me that if you keep saying that, you're never going to get better. And she'd sit with me in the library after, and to this day, I stay in touch with her. But I'd say another teacher who was, for me, my visualization teacher was the biggest, right? Because she was teaching me skills that I couldn't learn in school. Mm-hmm. And I will always be so grateful for that. And I now know that that's what I want to teach to other people, which is what I do. And then I was saying before, it's such a cheesy answer, but I think it's important to mention that probably the most extraordinary person that changed my life is me. If I didn't do the actions or I didn't take initiative or I didn't keep going with it, I never would have been the person I am today. So whilst people have supported me, ultimately, I'm so grateful that I chose to want something more for my future and to keep fighting. And so I've got to also thank myself for being that person for me, whether that's thanking my 15-year-old self, but also my 50-year-old self. Yeah, go you guys, So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Amazing. I love that. What a great
answer.
Love it.
Inspirational.
Thank you so much, Maya. It's been
you.
Absolutely wonderful to have you with us today. And thank you for teaching us so very much.
Amazing.
Thank you. If this episode has left you feeling empowered or wanting to know more, please do leave us a review and let us know what you thought. It helps others find the podcast and learn from the extraordinary lives we showcase.
And if you have an idea for a future topic, we would love to hear from you. You can WhatsApp us on 0203 951 3551. Please do also share and follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you want to hear more about what we do at Duke's Education, you can go to dukeseducation.com.
How to Live an Extraordinary Life is a platform media production. The producer is Adrian Bradley and the executive producers are Jonathan Pascoe and Nick Minter.
Keep living your own extraordinary life, and we'll see you next time.